Select Board meeting of March 19th. Town manager Wells, per the town charter. Congratulate. Pause there. Can you hear me now?
Second.
Any other nominations?
Aye.
Abstain. Well, thank you. So next order of business actually be the election, nomination, and election of vice chair. For a second. Are any further nominations? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Greta, congrats. Okay. Minutes of February 20th, 2024.
Move approval of the minutes of February 20th, 2024, with any corrections.
Second.
Page 3.
On item number 10, it said artesian vapor, and it should be artisan vapor.
Hearing no corrections. Accepting the minutes.
Aye.
I has. Next, public comment. This is a part of the meeting where anybody can make a comment that they wish on general issues. It can be on something that is on the agenda. You don't have to wait for that agenda item, but you want. But are there anybody who wishes public comment? We're not going to be doing specific, it's not on the agenda to do specific things. Basically the process of figuring out what to do about the budget is coming up, but that's going to be scheduled to come up around 7:20. It's around 7:30. Yeah, but you can say what you want now. Okay. Is there anybody online, Eric?
Nope, no one online.
Next, designee for examining and allowing claims.
So each year it's suggested the board designate one member and one alternate to sign warrants on behalf of the board. Warrants are made available for informal review at regular board meetings and sent to the full board using email after signature of the board. There's a resolution I included in your packet. This is something the board considers each year if you want to designate a member charged with that task, and then a backup.
I would love to volunteer.
Okay, we have a volunteer person. Yes, we would.
I can be the alternate.
So we need a formal
I
motion.
move that we appoint Gene Jensen as the designated member and go to D'Agostino as.
Your second.
Second.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Congratulations again. Racking up the victory.
Three,
So-
three, one, nine.
Select Board rules of transaction and meeting schedule.
Yep, this is another thing for your reorganizational meeting. The board adopts rules of transaction, conduct business throughout the year. I've included in your packet the rules of transaction as they were last year. I went through, I didn't see any potential edits, but certainly if any board member has changes they'd like to make, bring them up this. And then we also put together as attachment A to that a schedule of select board meetings. Granted, this can always be changed and amended throughout the year. Typically, the board meets the first and third Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. room. With the exception of the month of August, it's typically just the third Tuesday of the month. And following in November this year, Election Day is on the first Tuesday of the month. So I've moved that select board meeting Wednesday of that week for now. Anticipate the board will be asked to work Election Day. And then following the format we did last year for our budget overview, putting that on a Saturday in December and not having the multiple meeting nights in December, that seemed to be consensus around that. But that outlines your schedule for the year. It's up to the board how you want your rules of transaction to read and how your meeting schedule.
Discussion?
We don't need to change it tonight, but maybe to think about, it says public hearing notices shall be duly warned in the Observer or the Burlington Free Press. I was just thinking 7 days might be a better solution, better option than the Free Press since it's free, and Burlington Free Press isn't getting delivered, it's getting delivered on a delay these days, so like I said, I don't think we need to change it today, but maybe something to consider for next year. Is it really an or is it an and?
It was an or. It came up a couple years ago where we had a bond warning that had to appear 3 weeks in a row, and there was an oversight by the Observer to include it. So we were able to remedy it by getting it into the Free Press at the end of that week because their publication was more frequent.
Interesting.
I know that's how that landed
Yeah.
a couple years ago.
Like I said, just something to consider.
Or even just a newspaper of general circulation. And that's when you're doing a service by publication in law. That's what the statute says. Anyway, okay. So we're not making an amendment to that. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt the Select Board Rules of Transaction and Meeting Schedule dated March 19th, 2024, for the term of the current Select Board ending in March 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next on the agenda is a public hearing, but that's actually, I think the warning for it is
7:15?
7:15, and we're early. So I'll ask the chair emeritus. What would you do?
I would actually open it at around roughly 7:10. There'll be a presentation, I think, and take a few minutes, and we'll be closer to 7:15, I think, by the time we can actually open to the public.
That sounds great. Unfortunately, the person making the presentation is Matt Delonte, and he's not in the room.
I'm sending him a text right now.
Can we do the liquor licenses?
That's a good idea. Yeah, Eric, can you address that?
Sure. Yeah, we can jump to other business here. So liquor and tobacco license renewals. There was a question from the board last time with, say, a license renewed and its date wasn't up quite yet and there was a violation. Town clerk consulted with the Department of Liquor Control. Basically, if a violation occurs at any point, the town's notified, the business is notified. Because a renewal's already happened, it won't jeopardize that process from happening. That was kind of the feedback they had for us. So I don't think there's any risk with the board approving something when there might be a little bit of lag for the exact date that it needs to come up again. I know in talking to Sarah, all the liquor licenses on this list have an April 29th renewal date. That's going to kind of get pushed a day or so each year further ahead. So we talked about a motion to consider with these, to consider approving the renewals for next license year as approved by DLC. Their system has a lot of differing dates right now, and it might just be the cleanest way for that. So the board to consider, a motion to renew the liquor licenses as presented, and a separate motion to renew the tobacco licenses as presented.
Oh, do you need a motion or can I ask a question?
What- Nobody can tell you what to do.
Robert. So there was a question last time about approving liquor licenses too far ahead of, in case there's a violation in between that and their renewal date. Did that just get addressed in what you said that I was?
Yeah, that's what we got back from DLC. As licenses are renewed and there's a violation, it's brought up and dealt with. Depending on the severity of it, the frequency of it, it's handled the same way. So I don't think there's a risk for the board if that were to occur and you've renewed something. It doesn't necessarily mean if there was a violation that the license would be revoked even if it was in this period. But that was the best feedback we could get from the state on it.
I guess what I thought was the concern was that there's, certainly if you have enough of a violation that you lose your license, that's like one violation, but it could just be like the select board has a concern because there's been some minor violations, but too many of them. So that was, I thought, the concern.
So that was the most we could get from the state. I can follow up with them some more, but that Sarah tried to talk to 4 or 5 people.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's really just the select board, whether or not we're comfortable.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a
Yeah,
state thing.
that's
It's really just a
their
matter of-
position on it.
Their position is, the state's position is gonna be, if it's serious enough to lose their license, it doesn't matter when it's
Right.
renewed or when you're renewing, they're gonna lose their license, but.
And this changed a couple years ago. It used to always be an April 30th to May 1st renewal. Then they changed it for when a new business came, it would be from the date that license was granted. So you get these kind of 1 or 2 offs in our whole licenses that we offer in the town. So brings up these different situations to think through. But it's certainly the board's purview to renew these. The list you have before you tonight for, I know alcohol is all an April 29th renewal. Tobacco licenses, I'd have to double check with Sarah. She probably has it on. She printed this out for me this afternoon. But you can wait on this till April 2nd as well. There's nothing critical tonight that has to be.
No, I mean, I don't mean really I don't think there's more information or anything, it's just, I just
No.
wanted to know what we were kind of discussing last time.
I mean, I think the only, the reason that, kind of got pinged for me was because there was one time we had someone who had had some minor violations, and we had the business owner come in and address kind of their remediation efforts and what they were doing to make sure that didn't happen going forward. Which, kind of eased our, feelings in order to renew that license. But, they could still come in and address the things for us. I mean, but the license would have already been approved, in that time, but.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I guess I will move to adopt. Should I make 2 separate motions?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'll move to approve the liquor licenses for 2029 as presented, 2024 as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it.
Okay, and I will also move to approve the tobacco licenses as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay. Well, now we are closer to the time, so I will convene the public hearing. The official notice, reading it into the record, the Williston Selectboard will hold a public hearing to receive comment on proposed changes to the existing Williston Unified Development Bylaw to amend the town-wide official map and the regulation plan and street specifications maps in the form-based code, parentheses, Appendix F, close parentheses, pursuant to 24 VSA Section 4442 and the Williston Unified Development Bylaw. Public hearing will take place Tuesday, March 19, 2024, at 7:15 PM in the Beckett McGuire Meeting Room at the Williston Town Hall, located at 7900 Williston Road. And remote participation is also available. So, Matt?
Great, thanks for having me here tonight. This is a relatively simple and isolated amendment to Williston's zoning. It relates to the removal of future streets, in other words, streets that don't exist but have been drawn on the official map, the regulating plan map, and the street specifications map that accompany Williston's form-based code, which is a zoning overlay in Taft Corners. In the case in front of us, the property owner, Vermont State University, through conversations with the town, requested that the town consider removing these streets. They don't align with any existing streets or the buildings on the site. They were a sort of a speculative idea that resulted from a conversation between Vermont Technical College and the form-based code consultant at the time. And VTSU would like the freedom to just sort of plan for the campus without any additional burdens of zoning at this time. So the amendment takes the streets that are on the inside of the Blair Circle, as well as sort of an entryway alley coming into the campus, and removes them from the map, leaves a blank slate on the inside of the circle. Should VTSU come to the town with a master plan in the future that lays out some interior streets in a different way, these maps could be amended again to accommodate that, or things could just be left as they are. That's the amendment in front of you. It is simply to delete those streets from the map. There are no text changes to the zoning, no changes to the development standards under this amendment.
Questions from the board?
Even I can't come up with a new question for this.
This is a public hearing, so is there anybody in the audience who wishes to make a comment on this issue or ask questions? Seeing no one. Eric, is there anybody online?
Nope, just staff from the newspaper, so I'll go online.
If that is the case, then a motion to close the public hearing would be in order.
I move to close the public hearing on proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw and official map.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay, so next would be the actual zoning bylaw and official map amendment. So if there are questions for Matt or comments. Okay, hearing none, a motion would be in order.
I'll move to adopt the amendments to the Unified Development Bylaw and official map as presented.
Is there a second?
Second?
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Great. So,
Thank you. I'll be back later.
Thanks, Matt.
Not gonna
We're
go
saving it all for
as-
later.
It's not gonna go as easy.
Get your steps in.
My favorite.
So next, the fiscal year 2025 budget revote planning discussion. Eric, if you could lead us off on that.
Yep, I provided a board a memo, this discussion set up for, to talk about just planning ahead and thinking about public feedback and process and timeline for getting a revote together for the budget. First, for the public feedback, one thought I had for the board to consider is you could, at your next meeting, thinking about holding a public hearing on the budget. We could advertise that the next couple of weeks. We could put some time aside at the April 2nd meeting for that. I could also do some other outreach, online forums, some drop-in chats to gather additional feedback that I could collate and report for the board, as well as another idea. The board's then going to need to determine an approach for the budget development. You may want to consider setting some targets, for example, an expense bottom line, a tax rate, a number increase. A reminder, our expense bottom line was about a 9.8% increase that was considered at town meeting day. and just under 4 cents per $100 of assessed value on the tax rate on that component of it. The select board is going to need to decide which operational items to prioritize, and staff can outline possible scenarios and look at a number of different components of the operating budget as you consider what you want to rewarn for the budget. And then thinking about timeline as well, consulted with the town attorney for a budget revote. The warning must be at least 7 days before the vote's going to be held. You'd also hold a public information hearing, I think at least 5 days before. So that's the minimum. You know, pragmatically, I'd suggest more time for public outreach and education on what the budget revote components are going to be.
I'm sorry, Eric, the public hearing has to be within 5 days?
Yeah, it has to be
Because our public hearing,
at least
before
5
vote,
days.
usually.
Oh, at least 5 days after voters are notified.
oh, okay, okay,
I knew 5 was in there.
okay.
So thinking about timing there, then thinking about logistics. You know, do you want to hold it at the Armory and kind of have a similar setup as you do on town meeting day? Tabulated votes. Talked to the town clerk today. You know, it certainly makes it makes it similar to what you have at town meeting day. You fill out the ballot, it's fed into the machine. You could also do a hand vote, but that takes longer to tally for the Board of Civil Authority at the end of the night there. So those things to think about. Also think about availability of space, you know, in the Armory, making sure it's available. If we're going to have the public information hearing in the school auditorium, making sure that's available. So those are more logistics, but they all play into this as well. We tend to reserve those spaces for town meeting day months in advance. The school district was able to get the Armory for April 16th, so they had a quick turnaround to get that scheduled anyway. And the board doesn't need to make a final decision on process this evening, but depending on timeline and what you want to work within, you can always add special select board meetings for budget review and work, depending what you want to have for a target. You might want to think about what your ideal date is to have that vote, that we can work backwards from there for meetings and components to work through it and public feedback and outreach. So you certainly don't have, you can make those decisions tonight, you don't have to. You can, but I'm thinking, by April 2nd, that meeting, you may want to come to a consensus on what the timeline looks like. So there's going to be certainly work to be done here, and you can help me give staff direction and Shirley and I to do some work preparing the budget materials for you to review and make decisions how you want to craft the budget.
Bottom line is we need to have a successful, an approved budget by July 1, right?
Ideally, there can be, I brought up with the town attorney briefly, there's some other provisions with borrowing money for operations if needed in the short term, but I think, ideally the budget's approved by then, and with that week turnaround, it's tight. There's opportunity if there needed to be multiple considerations, but I would say before July 1st would be ideal.
Yeah, well, I certainly don't want to schedule a vote June 30th. Anyway, okay, so questions and comments from the board, and then I'd like to ask the people who were here to speak to give their input, but process questions?
April 16th is the CVSD. There's no way we can do it before that.
I do not want us to do that date.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, even if we could, I don't want to.
And I don't think we can.
No.
It's, if we're going to actually receive input, if we're
Right.
actually going to present the thing.
That would be 2 weeks from the public, if we're doing a public, forum 2 weeks from now, that would be 2 weeks from that, and that feels
too rushed.
too rushed.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
Just an arbitrary date, maybe May 1st, before May or before June.
Well, I think like the first or second week of May, because there's a school break where a lot of people travel in April, so you'd want people to get safely back from that, but early May.
Generally, by mid-May, have it done
Yeah, have
and
it
wrapped
done.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
other questions about process?
Well, I would really like to hear from folks because, well, not because, obviously we want to hear from folks, but we had pretty significant public safety pressures on the budget, and I think there are clearly some things that we could talk about pushing off another year, given the tremendous pressure on the property tax this year. But then when it starts getting into, do we cut policemen, do we cut firemen, that I would think I would like to have some input on and not just make an assumption. So yes, I would like to have a sort of a robust couple of weeks of hearing from people. And the bonds, we have to talk about the bonds. We put them back up again, right?
Yes, so you can warn a bond twice in a year period. So you can think about that for this special meeting. Could also think about November, potentially, if you want to have a special meeting with one of those bonds or defer them. Their projects have been identified in the town's capital budget for a number of years. It's not critical to move forward with them right away. In terms of the parking lot, we have applied for a $200,000 grant from the state for that project. We should hear about next month. That combined with the potential of $200,000 with ARPA funding you discussed previously could take the borrowing amount down to $500,000. With the state too, it's likely if we were to get that grant, we would need to have the project fully funded to receive the grant, most likely. Take it one step at a time to see if we get that to revise scope. But you have those options for the bonds. You can only have a bond fail twice in a calendar year, or in a 12-month period.
Mm-hmm.
Further discussion? Otherwise, folks, somebody want to go first?
My name is Chris Gefkin, and I'm a Williston resident. I would just encourage the board to get the date out as quickly as possible and share it with the public, and educating us on what the changes are, as well as consider getting the municipal tax rate back down to a flatter rate, like 27.27 as opposed to 0.3s, keep going up. Try to get back to a lower rate, and just be considerate with the spending. And I don't think it was around police and fire reduction as much as it was around additions to the like HR director, the paving out back, and some of those numbers, especially with like the EV chargers, and some of the just consider some of the extras that we're putting in the budget so that it's not impacting us every year, year after year, compounding that extra spend. That's about it.
Thanks. Thank you, Chris.
Sue Powers. I came tonight basically to hear what you folks are thinking about, so that we can respond to that. How you're feeling about where you're going to make, hopefully, adjustments. From what I was hearing the night of the town meeting, a lot of the driving force and some of the increases in the budget is like healthcare cost increases, different things like that. And I think we need to be really aware in Williston. I've been here over 35 years, so there's a very aging population in Williston on fixed incomes now. They're retiring. I don't think it's fair every year to think that they can make up those increases, because like this year, okay, we had to pay more for Medicare Part B. Do we have a say in that? No. We have to come up with the extra. And I think some of this have always, well, we have to meet these increases because it can't come out of the employees. And I think it can. I think it comes a point where they have to make sacrifices. We do, and they need to, so. But that, I really want some public hearing so we can decide what you guys are thinking about and, hopefully come to some sort of healthy decision, because I'm very saddened tonight talking to a lot of older people in Williston that are scared. They don't know if they're going to be able to stay in their homes anymore. that they've raised their kids in, hoping they could stay, all these programs, age well and everything. Well, stay at home, people want to stay at home and age and be in a familiar, loving environment. They're not going to be able to afford to if this continues. Every year, oh, it's only this, oh, it's only that, and it adds up, it builds on. So, the taxes go up and up, and I just feel bad for a lot of people that can't afford it. They're thinking about having to sell. So I don't think that's fair. So that's my, that's my feelings about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other comments or input?
Hello, everyone. How are you tonight? I'm Sherry Arnold, and I'll make it quick. I've already said quite a bit at the last meeting, the town meeting. 1 in 3 Vermonters are elderly by 2030. I'm sure if you guys read 7 Days or looked it up yourself, by 2030, the amount of elderly will be doubling the same amount of children and that we have in the state. Also, I'll be 66 by then. Will I be retiring? My husband be retiring? Probably not. I have concerns too with elderly, since we have elderly parents and family members who would like to stay in their home. And so I don't want this to be, me coming up here and I feel like I'm being a bother or bickering or whatever, but I think there are concerns that we have with taxes going up and also with wanting to retain and have youth graduating from colleges or moving here and starting their own families. I'd really like to see more of a revival of that, young people coming and being able to afford a home. Out of my 4 children, I have 1 here, and she's thinking about going west. She and her husband are both 25, and they're looking to buy something, and a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home by Snyder's or wherever is $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 or more, and if they're looking for something older or something that they can afford. My daughter works at the hospital as a nurse. She has to think about going much further out, and that doesn't make sense to be an hour away, driving an hour in, especially in the winter, and back. So we're looking at just a lot of costs going up and increases, and I know that when my husband and I, probably like you folks, and you're thinking about maintaining your own home, this is the town, the school, but we're not talking about the school budget right now, but town or school, whatever, when you're thinking about maintaining and you've got 8 or 10 or 12 things on the list, you have to plan and save and execute, whether you do the work yourself or you hire out. You have to make plans on what you can actually afford to do. And that's just, that's just what happens. And I think that also with the parking lot, our church, Immaculate Heart of Mary, is looking to possibly this year redo the parking lot, which is going to be $115,000. We are not going to have any EV chargers. We don't seem to need any EV chargers at this time. There's talk of, well, we'll put it in place and it will happen in the future. Why don't we table that and wait? We don't know when or if that will even happen. So those are kind of my 2 cents. That's all I wanted to say tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have a question.
Sure.
Do you have public hearings for the department heads? Be there so they can explain budgets, explain their costs and justify, because that might help figure out the cost.
Sure.
Is that a possibility?
Eric, I think we can.
Yeah, either department heads or town manager and the finance director. We're well versed in that as well.
So there's no formal action on the agenda for this tonight, but is this something we're going to be taking up more on April 2nd, or?
Did we want to have a public hearing on April 2nd?
Are we
part of-
ready for
part
a
of me-
public hearing?
What?
What would the public hearing consider? I mean,
Oh,
I
I guess I would just like to hear from people as opposed to putting one together and then checking to see if we got it right. But is that what everyone else is thinking?
We're not gonna know if you got it right until they vote on it.
Right, so.
But have to have something to present to them for them to react.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna hear from people what they
yeah.
thought, but I guess,
I think we have to have specifics before
Okay.
we do that. And so, Eric, what kind of timeline would we be talking about for specific proposals. Actually, I suppose that's putting the cart before the horse. We need to come up with goals of either tax rate or dollars or both.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if that's the approach you want to take, just from a standpoint where if there's a target, then we can work to pull numbers to give you options to reach that target, to let you know what the reality is to reach those targets. And there's different layers of decision-making depending on what the targets are going to be. So I think that may be a helpful approach. Just a reminder, a lot of the increase in the spending expense side of the budget is tied to wages and benefits of staff. We're already starting some additional sweeps of the budget and looking where we can trim back, but payroll and benefits make up a vast majority of the operating budget. But we'll certainly work to see what the board's goals are for a target, and we can give you options and different things to think about in considering how to reach those goals, and staff can prepare that. But depending what your timeline is, we can do that work once you have that decision. But you could have an agenda item at your next meeting to talk about kind of what your goals are for the budget and give staff some more specific direction if you want, if you're not. Just kind of bring this up tonight for the first time since town meeting, so I know there's a lot to think about. So we could potentially have that discussion on April 2nd, and then staff would come back on April 16th with more of the nuts and bolts, or if you want to have a special, depending on the timeline you want to work within, we can make it our end, but I think probably 2 weeks from there would be good, just to give us a good amount of time to go through everything.
But then if we see it on the 16th, then the public, I understand a public hearing where you're presenting what we've decided, but it wouldn't really be an opportunity for people to weigh in because we wouldn't have time to change it because we would have already warned it.
No, not necessarily. We can do the public hearing and then warn the vote. They don't have to be tied together, do they?
Kind of similar to what you do in early January. There's kind of an initial manager's budget, then you have a public hearing usually the first week in January to get feedback on it. Then you finalize it and the warning later in January. So you could do that kind of in a truncated version approach like that, come up with a draft for the warning, get public feedback on that draft, and then make any changes after that feedback, and then proceed with warning it for that vote. Those multiple steps, if you want to keep on the 2-week meeting intervals, that might push the vote probably to the later side of May. So you might want to think about
That's what I was looking
adding,
about.
adding a special meeting.
Yeah.
In thinking about, we're here now in this moment. I would love to personally provide some guidance to our staff and just initially start thinking about what that goal is. Do we, it's at 9.84% right now. Is it a matter of a percentage? Do we want to, have a model where it's at 5%, a model where it's at, level funded? Do we, there's no budget. What's for me, I would prefer to give them a goal sooner rather than later, so that one, you all have as much time as possible to think about these different scenarios, and then we can move this process along quicker, but again, while giving the public as much opportunity for feedback. So
By having the department heads present at the public feedback, would that help? Or, to explain the cost increases and what it's costing us what the budget is?
Certainly up to the board. I'll say, a lot of it ties into payroll and benefits that Shirley and I can speak to, but if it's a department kind of operational item, department heads can certainly speak to that. We can structure this any way the board would like. Certainly, like you have in December here from the department heads on proposals, they can be available depending how the board wants to design the process here.
It's just important for the public to understand all the different operational constraints also.
I like Greta's idea of giving some input tonight. I'm tripping over the calendar in my head, so if we see it for the first time on April 16th and we're voting second week of May, there's not a lot of, there's a vacation week in there.
But we,
unless we're all here, which I will be, so we could do that that week, but if, we'd have to have another meeting in between, or like if we
don't
look
have
at,
to- we don't have to have the vote the second week of May.
well, we're running out of, you said you didn't want to have it June 30th.
That's true. But, you know, I'd rather push it back a little bit and
Yeah,
see what happens, and then, you know.
and you can, okay, so what would that look like?
Here's-
So,
So in my head here, thinking.
yeah, I don't have a calendar
so-
in front of me. Isn't there
so-
April like 30th is like a Tuesday? I mean, is that a
Yeah, so thinking, you know, if the board has some initial direction tonight, you meet again in 2 weeks. We've started looking at the budget, and we have a list of things we've started. We can prepare that and have a conversation at your next meeting and kind of see where things are. We can get your initial feedback on what we're seeing with where the target is and what you may need to consider depending on what that number is and what our sweep looks like. You could give staff direction that night, and then at your meeting on the 16th, you could have staff could get direction that night. You could look at it again on the 16th, and you can invite the public to potentially comment on it at that point, depending where the work goes on the 2nd. You could add a special meeting on the 9th, what might be the way to go too, and come up with something that you want feedback on the 16th of April. Then that meeting on the 16th of April, then maybe potentially you move forward with working at a warning finalized for, you know, the mid-May or so, that week of the 13th or the 20th. Memorial Day is May 27th, so, you know, you may want to avoid the end of the week leading up to Memorial Day, or maybe the week of May 13th or something like that. You don't have to be 30 days out, but, you know, you probably want to be maybe at least 3 weeks or so.
So if the board was going to ask Eric to make a initial sweep with goals in mind, what would those goals be? I actually would like to see what it would look like for level funding the budget. I think that would be a very, very difficult thing, but I'd like to see it. And then, I don't know, anything I'm going to throw out is arbitrary.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine, I just took half of, you know, we're at almost 10, I figured a half of that, and, you know, 5%, and, I mean, maybe even like 7.5%. I mean, I know that's a lot of work to figure out, but, you know, if there was several different options presented, just to look at that and what that would mean for services and continuity of services for our town.
I can share, I looked at it, you know, to take a percentage point off on the expense side, it would be a net reduction of $150,000. So then, you know, if you were to, spreadsheet over here still.
So are you talking about a net neutral, and then another one is 5?
I don't know what net neutral means in that context.
Just level, start at the beginning from like last year's budget?
Yeah.
That number?
Yeah.
So you suggest-
Yeah, I said level funded, so you say the same thing, but I like net neutral, because that sounds,
Net neutral.
yeah.
So yeah, so we're just talking about a tiered approach, so basically cutting down from where we are, if we cut down this percentage off, what that would look like if we cut this percentage off, and if we were at, you know, 0% increase, what that would look like for our town.
I can say just preliminarily, you know, I think we can get the 1% off. When you start getting beyond 1.5%, 2%, you're really talking about cutting staff at that point. You're talking about, we haven't run the number yet, but for your unionized staff have collective bargaining agreements that are followed. Your non-unionized staff, it's at your discretion for their cost of living increase and their merit increase. So you can have a disparity in those numbers, but, you know, that's certainly challenging for, you know, unionized staff getting a raise and non-unionized staff maybe not getting as much of a cost of living or something like that.
Might provoke the non-union people to form a union, and everybody will be told,
Yeah, so you have discretion there, but, you know, there's these other factors to think about, but we looked at capital a little bit too, but once you start getting beyond that, probably 1.25%, 1.5%, it's really talking about reducing the size of the staff. It's likely at that point. We can run those scenarios, I just want to be upfront with the board about that.
but I'd like to see that.
So level funding would be cutting almost $1.5 million.
Yep.
Yeah, I was focusing on like half the tax rate, you know, because I'm okay with, if you think we can be a little more aggressive on revenue, especially, I've said, like even if it's, if there are things in the budget that, if the revenue comes in higher, we'll do them. If, you know, if it doesn't, we don't do them. Some of that. I also wonder, we've been so understaffed in fire and police at different times, but we budget for everybody being there the whole year, right? So there might be some ability to say, well, you know, it's likely that we won't be fully staffed the whole year. That's something that I would be okay with, a risk assessment kind of budget reduction.
Yep.
And I hate to say it, but I think that HR director is going to have to wait another year. And I'm not, the detective, I thought I was really clear what that position was when we added it to the budget. At the town meeting, it was a little bit softer, a little squishier, so I'd probably like to revisit what that detective position was going to do for the town. So those two ads I'd like to see as well. But I was sort of aiming for a cut the tax rate in half.
Cut the increase in half?
Cut the increase in half to
So
2
we-
cents.
Okay.
Yep.
That is something that I wanted, that's what I was thinking, if department heads were here, we could ask them this question,
Well,
like,
this,
how is it justified? Because one of the things, I hear this. I'm sorry, if you're gonna. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yes. We know a lot of people that own businesses, and just for instance, Home Depot, we're in there a lot, because we had a construction business. Everything's locked up now. I know they're trying to stop the theft. However, when you question, like we've talked to people at Agway, Home Depot, you know, all these places, and it's like, we've seen people walk out with stuff, and like, aren't you going to say something to them? And they actually will make gestures on the way out, very obscene gestures, like, haha, I'm walking out with this. And then all the staff say, the police won't come anyways, because they can't do anything about it. I've heard this from more than one, and that disturbs me, and I think I'm gonna meet with the police chief himself, because why do we need an extra sergeant or whoever's gonna do investigating if they're not bothering to go on the calls? And when I go and read the blot in the Observer every week, under investigation, moved along. Well, what does that mean, moved along? Did they suffer any consequences for their behavior? So I don't understand what this position's gonna do. If they're going to help enforce our laws, then fine, but I'm not sure. I was over there for many years with animal control and other things, and sometimes I think they're not as busy as they could be. And I supported them all the way. My name's on the front of that building for supporting that building and being a part of the building committee, but there's some things where I think people, again, need to make some sacrifices. If they get paid well, they have good benefits. There's a lot of people right now losing their jobs. They have no benefits. So I kind of think that it's time for people to realize that taxpayers don't have bottomless pockets. And they're not going to always be able to get these
you
things.
said a lot of people are losing their jobs. I mean, Vermont has a 2%
We
unemployment
do.
rate.
But yeah, you talk to
So-
people and they're like, they're not employed. I don't quite get that. But
I haven't talked to anybody like that. I hear that
Oh,
anecdote, and
we do. We have seen some, but I'm wondering if it's more their choice.
I don't
know.
I-
But
I don't want to sound like an old curmudgeon, maybe I'm becoming one. But with a 2% unemployment rate, if anybody's complaining that they can't find work, then they're not.
I know.
You know, and
But then you do hear it, so I
I've
don't
suffered
know.
through recessions myself when I was looking for work, and
Yeah.
I don't criticize people who are unemployed, but, you know, I just, when you say people are losing their jobs, I don't see that. I see we have trouble hiring people because the
I
market
think
is so
it probably
tight.
depends on your skills, maybe. We
Yeah.
never had trouble finding work
Yeah.
either, but I think it might depend on your skill levels and what you offer.
Yeah.
But I don't know, but I just think that it's time to, if the department heads were here, we could justify
Well,
why
this
is this?
this wouldn't be the night for that, I mean, anyway.
No, but I mean, if you can schedule it,
Yeah.
we can talk about it amongst yourselves, that's kind of why we're here, is
Sure.
to see how are you gonna handle this?
Yep.
You know, it's just that type of thing. And I'd like to see, like, I guess we can get the line-by-line expenditures right, from the department heads, I'm assuming? When there's a
That's
lump-
all in
They're
the
all-
budget
lump
they're all-
proposal, so you can actually access all of that
Okay,
information online.
because there's
Yeah,
like a
that's all.
lump
Yep.
sum, so what goes into
Yeah,
that?
it
Yeah,
should be
that's all
right.
been
If you have the
online.
town report there, it's all in the town report.
Okay, because when I saw some of the, there was like a lump sum for equipment, a lump sum, so I wondered like, what?
Oh,
what
the
is-
detail, yep.
in- yeah.
If you go on the town website and if,
Okay.
I can also print out a copy if you'd like
Okay.
it.
I just wonder, because I'm looking at it, we drive in and it's like, there's 7 vehicles out there. I'm not sure why we have 6 or 7 cruisers, plus there's some sitting on the other side of the garage, sitting there. But those kind of things are things that taxpayers just see and go, that doesn't make sense. 2 guys, usually it's 2 on duty, 24 hours, does that change now? 2 on each shift?
Yeah, at least 3 overnight, more during the day.
But still, I'm just curious why we have 6 cruisers and then 3 more on the, I'm not sure what those are doing over there. Are they heading ready to go to the salvage yard or what
We have
the
an
scoop
unmarked,
is?
but we'd be happy to sit down with you and the
Okay,
police chief.
well, those are
and
the kind of
answer all
things
your
that
questions.
people do see, but they're afraid to ask questions about because they're not sure what they're gonna do. Because it adds up. It adds up. 50,000 here, 80,000 here, and it starts to add up when you start looking at the budget.
Thank you.
So I do think we need to move on. Do you have the
Just,
instruction that you need?
yeah, just looking back at my notes here, so kind of an illustration of what level funding of the budget would look like if we kept the same expense bottom line as we did last year.
Right.
Looking at so make sure I have this right here. Looking at like a 5% increase, and maybe looking at like 7.5, 8.5, something like that. And then we have two variables here. There's always the spending side, but then there's the revenue side where the tax rate comes into play. So we could, there could be a bottom line on the spending side, but could work on the revenue or revenue and expenses to get the tax rate increase. And these two variables at play here that feed off of each other. And, it may be something where you have a goal on the expense side and a goal on the tax rate side because they all feed into each other and how we design this. I've got a list started. We can add to that list, and I think we can run scenarios with what the reductions mean for percentages when we start getting into cutting cost of living increase, cutting staff, things like that, just to illustrate it and how that corresponds with service delivery.
Okay.
Deferring more capital as well.
Okay. Is that good?
Yep.
We'll get to work.
All right.
Report back on the second.
Okay. We're surprisingly on time.
Highlight of the evening.
Next, fiscal year 2023 audit report presentation. We're going to have somebody coming in on Zoom, Rick Brigham.
Yep, Rick is on here, so I'll get him connected.
Gene can't wait.
I can't wait.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Rick.
Is it good for me to start?
Yep. Hello. Yeah, Rick, if you could introduce yourself and segue into your presentation.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me here tonight, everybody. Yeah, I'm Rick Brigham. I'm an audit partner with Sullivan Powers and Company, and we performed the audit for the town of Williston for June 30, 2023. And so what I was hoping to do is give you a quick highlight of the report and the results, and to take you through some of what I think are the key pieces of it quickly. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, obviously, on numbers at this point because a lot of the data in this is over, 9 months old at this point. So I'm mostly going to focus on the process and the report and the findings related to the report. So there's a lot of information here. If you look at this for the report in front of you, it's 79 pages. And I'm sure if you start reading through it, you start looking at it and maybe going a little blurry-eyed. There's certainly a lot of things that go into making this report. Um, the information that comes from management on this report is all based on things that have happened throughout the year, whether it's paying bills, payroll, policy, setting up, controls and things like that to take in revenues. So there's a lot that goes into this. And the other part of this for the town of Williston, I just want to point this out because I find it very important, is taking responsibility for these financial statements. Really, this whole financial statement isn't really my product. I have 4 pages of this audit report that is really mine. It really is the management and finance team that does all the transactions throughout the year and creates the report. And especially in Williston, a lot of times I have to help my clients generate and build these annual reports, audit reports. But Shirley did all the preparation of this report, and all we did was review it and help her kind of do some tweaks to it here and there. And I always like to tell her, that we appreciate that because we would prefer all our clients do that financials, but not many of them do. So that's a big plus for the town of Williston for sure. So I'd like to kind of just start rummaging through. If you look through pages 1 through 4, that's the audit opinion. We have basically 3 choices when we give an audit opinion. This is really my charge in this whole document, is giving an opinion on the financial statements that are laid out in front of you. We have 3 choices, which can be an adverse opinion, which means the financial statements aren't fairly stated. A qualified opinion means they're fairly stated except for something. And an unqualified opinion is the best you can have. And then once again, the town of Williston has achieved an unqualified opinion. And I always like to congratulate my clients who achieve that, because not all my clients do. And all of them try to work hard and stuff, but you guys have achieved that. And I think it's important to point that out. Kind of going through some of the other important aspects of the financial statement. If you're looking at nothing else, pages 5 through 13, that is called the management's discussion and analysis. If you looked at nothing else and you just focused on that, that's a really good user-friendly guide to a summary for what happened during the audit year. Kind of talks a little bit about what's happening in future years, tax rates, stuff like that. So there's a lot of great information in that. So if you only focused on that, you'd get a lot of great information about the audit. If we're going to skip over to pages 16 through 17, those are what we call if we look at page 16, these are your major funds: general fund, capital fund, your ARPA fund. So this is a balance sheet, basically a snapshot in time of all your assets and liabilities at June 30, 2023, netting down to your fund balances for each of those funds, for each of those major funds. And if you turn to the next page, you basically get your income statement of those 3 major funds, and then the totals for the non-major funds as well. So that provides you with all the revenues you took in and all the expenses for those funds during the year. Same kind of thing if you're looking at pages 19 through 20. Same thing. This is more the enterprise funds, the water, sewer, and the stormwater fund. Again, a snapshot in time of the assets and liabilities at June 30, 23, and also a snapshot of the revenues and expenses that went throughout the year for those 3 major funds. If you're looking at pages 24 through 51, again, this is more for a deep dive. If you're looking for information about assets, capital assets, debt, terms of debt, collateralization of cash, fund balances, and what the fund balances can be used for. If you're looking for a deep dive into any of those kinds of facets of your financial report, these notes will give you a lot of great detailed information that you can rummage through and kind of pick out the pieces and answer questions. Pages 52 through 63, you've probably seen those all year long. That is the budget actual for the general fund. And I know that we didn't have many audit adjustments to that. So what you were seeing throughout the year was consistent to the end of the year. So there shouldn't have been any big surprises from the reports you were seeing throughout the year. So those all came out really well. And then at the end of the report, if you're looking at pages 65 through 70, we already talked about the major funds, the general, the ARPA, but these are the non-major funds, the other smaller funds related to recreation path, reappraisal, grant funds, all those other different fund trial balances. They're all back here again, same thing, balance sheet and income statement for the year for each of those funds, showing the activity that occurred, how it went from last year to this year, and where the fund balances ended up on those. As part of our process for performing an audit, obviously we give the 4-page opinion, but also as we go through the journey of the audit, if we run into anything where we believe there's material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we found during the course of the audit, we are required to report those to management. So in this meeting, that would be my requirement. We did not find any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that needed to be reported. There were a couple other recommendations of things related to some policies we think you should have that we put in our management letter, but those are other recommendations. They're not required to be in writing. It's just our firm's policy to always put them in writing. So they're out there if you want to, talk to Shirley about those. I know they're on her board and already being worked on. So I think she's made really good progress on all that. A couple other required communications. We had encountered no difficulties in dealing with staff and management during the course of the audit. We had no disagreements with staff or management during the course of the audit. No consultations with other auditors occurred during the audit. And all entries that we proposed were posted by management, so there were no unposted entries to the audit report. So that's my quick synopsis. I didn't know if there were any questions.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, I don't know if you, Shirley, if you want to take this one or not, but in the schedule of recommendations, there was a comment about procurement procedures. Did you want to elaborate on that at all?
Sure.
Or would you mind elaborating on that, I should say?
So, one of our purchases, we used a purchasing consortium that we are a member of. So essentially, we don't, like when we purchase a state contract, we don't have to go back out and get those 3 quotes.
Right.
So we did a consortium, and that is not in our personnel policy, so, personnel purchasing policy. So it's just one of those updates that goes along with all the grant purchasing that needs to go into our purchasing policy.
Oh. I know that consortium purchasing is a little on the gray area, I think, at the state level, but this is just like our own policy that we
Right.
didn't follow.
Right.
Because
It
we used a
references-
consortium, which.
Right, it references the state contract, but not other consortium.
Got it. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yep.
Other questions or comments?
Just want to say, reiterate what a great job you all do, and internally here within the town, and it is testament to how diligently you all work and how hard you all work. That this audit has come out this way again, year after year, and that you've earned praise from the auditors.
Absolutely.
Other questions or comments?
I don't know, we seem to be insinuating that we didn't all read every page.
Yeah.
We know you can.
We all have our, it's like a basketball team. We can't all be the point guard.
After Gene's inspection is good enough for me.
And just to echo Greta, Shirley's finance team is the lead on this, working with our auditors, and I have a brief engagement interview with the auditors as part of this, but I know Shirley and staff accountant Treasurer Mary Grant put hours and hours of work into this, so just thanking them publicly for all their hard work. The town's financial management's in good hands.
Absolutely something to be proud of, a clean audit.
And Rick, it's rare that your clients don't have or have this level of passing grade. Is that what?
Well, it kind of is all over the board, and it kind of goes from year to year. But this year, yeah, I'm having a lot of audits that are having more findings or material weaknesses, maybe unqualified opinion, but still might have a material weakness or significant deficiency. So, but in this particular case, having an unqualified opinion and no material weaknesses, significant deficiencies is an excellent outcome. I have a few clients that do that, but again, a lot of what I was feeling and what I talked with my partners about related to this job was the fact that you guys and your finance team create the financials. That's a huge impact, and one we'd like to see the rest of the clients throughout the state do, because it really shows that they're taking charge of these financial statements and being responsible for them.
Great. Anything else? And if not, there is a proposed motion.
Jean, I feel like you gotta do it.
I know. And I actually found it this time, too. I move to accept the fiscal year 2023 audit report from the town auditing firm of Sullivan Powers as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. So thank you. And actually, thank you, Rick, for the work that your company does for this as well.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your meeting.
You too.
Thank you.
You too. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Next agenda item, energy efficiency and conservation block grant. And we're going to be hearing from Melinda.
Yeah, I just sent her a note. She's at the planning commission next door, so she should be en route.
Double duty. Okay. Are there any other items we can take up from the manager's?
Got some catering permits.
Let's,
Do it.
They're back.
okay, let's hear it.
I have to go on the record of saying that my book that I keep everything organized only goes to item 15. So when you have too many things on the agenda like we do tonight, it messes up my whole organization structure.
Get
That's
some
my
new
intent.
tabs.
15, next time, 15 is it.
Here we are. So the first is a catering permit for this weekend by Bevo LLC. It's at the Sugar Tree Maple Farm on Bradley Lane for Maple Open House Weekend. They're having an open house pancake breakfast. So by this, they'll have some spirits available. I reached out to them today to get a little more information. They need to put in I don't think they're aware of this, they need to put in an event permit. So I told them, get that into me tomorrow. We can approve it at the staff level, and said, do this next year, you need to get this in earlier. But given it's Maple Open House Weekend, if the board would consider approving this catering permit on the condition that staff approves a temporary event permit, is my suggestion to consider.
They're having liquor at a pancake breakfast?
Yeah, that's how I read it. I know.
Mimosas, perhaps?
More pancakes.
I didn't hear back from them today, but I can get more information and pass it on too once I get back.
Do you want to wait on it, or?
How can we wait? I mean, it's
Yeah.
this weekend, right?
Right, yeah. So.
I mean, I assume I guess we're gonna approve it if it's.
If there's no opposition, we'd be looking for a motion.
Move to approve, subject to their submitting a special events permit.
For a second.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay? The ayes have it? Okay, great. So let's circle back around to energy efficiency and conservation block grant. Melinda, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for running over from the planning commission.
Sure, yeah. No worries, thank you. So we brought this revised proposal back to you for the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant. And so this proposal has us purchasing one zero-turn mower for Public Works, maintenance and grounds, and one field line marker for the Recreation Department. The Recreation Department brought up this as a desired potential use of this grant, just because they're currently using a gas powered field line marker that requires a huge amount of labor to use it, and this robot would really cut down on labor as well as on use of fuel. So and also being able to purchase some hand electric tools as well. And we have money left over for technical assistance from the Department of Energy. That would be a separate application for a technical assistance voucher, and that's where we get technical assistance from a person that they assign to us for, and they offer any number of technical assistance areas. We'd need to choose an area to get assistance from them. And most importantly, this new proposal does not require the town to expend any of its own funds as match or anything. There would be some leveraged funding that would come from Green Mountain Power rebates and a federal tax credit, which municipalities can now take advantage of through direct pay option.
Questions from the board?
In terms of the technical assistance, we don't need to specify that in our proposal, what we want to use that technical assistance for. We're just generally applying for.
Well, we would, I would specify, but that application is a separate application, and I'm less concerned about getting that out the door as I am concerned about just the funding piece for the equipment.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a voucher program with a deadline coming up in April.
Yeah, but in terms of that, like, so the line item for this will just say technical assistance. It's not going to say technical assistance for ...
Well, so there's two different applications. One is for the equipment, which we could submit if we know what we want to spend that on. The other, the technical assistance would be a separate application, and we wouldn't submit it until we had, a fairly good idea of what we want to spend that on. And I think even so, they're pretty flexible. Like, we could, propose something, and then I think there's some flexibility to kind of tweak it and refine it and, change the scope of work or, develop a scope of work that suits our needs.
Well, thanks for reconsidering. Thanks for being flexible and coming up with a new idea. I don't think we use a gas-powered line marker, though, right now, right? It's just...
It's currently not in use because it's busted. We're using it. I don't know when it went out of commission, but
Okay.
yeah.
All right, well, that's 10 hours a week. That's a quarter of a person. If they really save that kind of time, just put it in the thinking banks. But no, thanks for everyone involved with being a little flexible on our questions last time.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what the robot's going to look like.
Oh,
I don't need to get into that tonight.
I forgot to print out the picture, but Todd's very excited about it. He signed
Well,
a conference.
I hope it's a biped.
It's interesting to look it up, and it talks about only needing 20 minutes to paint a field from initial. Saves up to 50% paint.
Right, and I think the big savings is in the time it takes to lay out a field initially. I think it would take a person 2 to 3 hours to lay out a soccer field. This thing can just, you just program it in, and it just needs it.
It says 2 minutes on the website.
Yeah, it's a GPS, and you load the field dimensions into it.
I think once you use it once, it'll be a piece of cake.
So there's no formal action required, but the staff is asking if we have consensus on the proposed spending. So what is the board's thought?
The proposed grant spending, right?
Right.
Yes.
Grant spending, yes, not town funds.
I support this. Yeah, I would really appreciate that you all
Yes.
have been so thoughtful.
It's a win-win.
Sounds like we have consensus?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Melinda.
Thank you.
Do you want to tag Matt, Melinda, to come for this? He's probably watching.
Do we have more catering permits to do in the meantime?
Oh, we do have 3 more as they, now with this quick break. If the chair would entertain taking
Yeah,
the catering
please,
permits.
I'm sorry, yes, please do.
We have another permit for April the 8th, on the Eclipse Day for the Red Barn Gardens, from the Sausage Shack LLC. They have a temporary event permit submitted, so same thing, I would suggest for the board to approve this liquor application on condition of staff approval of a temporary event permit. It doesn't meet the threshold for the select board to have to approve that permit. They anticipate about 75 people attending.
So it does not meet the threshold for the select board having to approve it?
Just the component for the cater for the alcohol service part of it.
Who's serving the alcohol?
It would be the Sausage Shack LLC.
Okay.
I'll move to approve, subject to a special events permit being submitted and approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The
I
ayes
feel like I'm missing out on something here. I'm getting people inquiring, and I just go, nope, nope, nope.
You want to take up the last one?
Yeah. if-
Sure.
And this is at Isham Family Barn. It's a wedding, so you're not missing out on this one. on August the 10th, and it is with 802 cocktails.
Okay.
No concerns from staff.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay, and one abstention? One abstention. Okay,
Thank you.
welcome back.
Guess you don't say no to everything.
Wastewater.
I'll make you a panelist map so you can share your presentation.
I joke, but it really is my favorite, so.
I brought pictures this time.
Boy. So clear the room out.
Thank you. Eric, if you could enable screen sharing.
I always forget that step. That should be.
Let me just get this into slideshow mode. There we go. Great. Thanks for having me back again tonight. I'm here to talk about the proposed Attachment A to Williston Sewer Allocation Ordinance for fiscal year 2025, the year beginning on July 1 of this year. I'm going to go through what I have in the memo that I prepared by following this slideshow, which I hope will be a little more entertaining and interesting, and talk about a couple things tonight, what we're here to do to determine how much wastewater capacity allocation will be made available for new users during the fiscal year of 2025. I want to talk about how we arrive at knowing or thinking we know how much capacity we have available to sell to new users, talk about history of use and trends in sewer flow in Williston, part of what informs that decision around sales, how that correlates to long-range planning and an outlook for the future. And then I'll go through the recommended allocations for fiscal year 2025. The contents of the memo that came in your packet and what's summarized by this presentation here were presented to the Planning Commission at their meeting on March 5th, and they voted to make a few changes to the memo I drafted for them, which are in the memo you have, and to move it on to you for consideration. So first, I just want to talk about the basics. How do we determine how much capacity the town of Williston has, remembering that we share our capacity at the plant with the the city of Essex Junction and the town of Essex. So we look at how much we own. That's an easy number to find out. We look at how much we're currently using, and that's relatively easy to figure out because there's one pump station that carries all of Williston sewerage from Williston to the plant, and it has a meter on it, and Public Works staff takes a reading every single day, and we come up with an average daily flow for the year by looking at those records. We also look at any capacity that has been sold to projects but not yet used. So you might sell capacity to a developer or a subdivision all at once, and then they're going to use that as they come in and get permits for individual houses or buildings or uses. And the town's rules around being able to hold capacity have become stricter over the years. You used to be able to hold capacity that you had purchased more or less indefinitely. That's not true anymore, so generally this number gets smaller most of the time. So we don't want to sell that again, because we've already sold it. So that's part of our calculation. Then we have a 7% reserve. That's just the amount that's recommended by our engineer that we don't sell or allocate to any particular use, but is just there to deal with fluctuations in flow and things like that. So we start with total, we subtract all of those other things I talked about, and we come up with how much capacity we have available to allocate. So this is what those numbers look like for fiscal year 2025. We're going to own 1,110,000 gallons per day capacity. I'm recommending that we use 717,658 gallons per day as our current usage. That was our actual average daily flow number for calendar year 2023, so ending in December. We have just a hair over 38,000 gallons per day in committed capacity, so this has been allocated to a project but not put to use under a permit yet. And the 7% of the total capacity number is 77,700 gallons per day, arriving at that bottom number of 276,641 gallons per day capacity available in total to sell to new users in Williston. I mentioned that we will have 1,110,000 gallons per day at the plant for fiscal 25, and the reason I said will is because we're on a 5-year cycle right now of purchasing 10,000 gallons per day additional capacity each year of the next couple upcoming fiscal years. So this table just gives you a schedule of that purchase. So I mentioned we're using that 717,000 gallon per day figure as our current flow, and the reason for that is that's our average daily flow for calendar year 2023. That's the blue line on this graph. The orange line is the 5-year rolling average flow. So typically what the select board has done is looked at both of these numbers and used the higher one to express how much capacity is currently in use. So if we have a low year but the average is still high, use the average. It's the more conservative strategy. This year and last year, the actual flow has been higher than the 5-year rolling average. So we're going to go with that higher number expressed by the blue line. Why is the blue line as high as it is? Well, one thing that we do see is a fairly significant relationship between how wet the year is and how much sewer flow we see. That's because of what's called I&I, in-migration infiltration. Sewer pipes leak in, not out generally. When it rains a lot, our system leaks in. The other thing that happens when it rains a lot is there are folks in town who have sump pumps that are connected to our system. They're not supposed to be. Public Works eliminates them whenever they find them. That's a great strategy for getting capacity back. But we do still have some out there. The wetter the year, generally, the higher the sewer flow. So this graph takes a little bit of explaining, but what I've done is looked at the flow for each year since 1997 and compared it to the 5-year rolling average and then said how much more or less than the 5-year average was the flow. And then I've done the same thing for rainfall. So these are on the same scale with each other. And sometimes it tracks pretty close, sometimes it's a little far off, but generally when there's more rain, there's more flow. That's what this graph is about. And down below, I just noted 2023 was 15% wetter in terms of inches of rain for the year than the 5-year average of the 5 years before that. And we saw 4% more flow in 2023 than our rolling 5-year average. So both went up.
Matt, where do we measure flow towards the sewer plant? Is that, I know I assume we measure water going into a house. Is it a couple
So-
places around town, or how do we?
So the flow is metered at the River Cove pump station, which pumps all of our sewerage to Essex.
So it's only that one place that we,
There may be meters on our other pump stations, Bruce would know. Aldrich and Elliott did a study of all of our pump stations, and I would have to go back and look and see if they've actually metered flows through them. A project I would love to do someday would be to take all of the water bills and map them against all of the locations in town and see where flows are going up and going down. And there's some really interesting stuff you could do with that. It's just a big data merging project that we don't have the horsepower for right now, and it's mostly my
I
curiosity.
like how your eyes light up, though.
I mean, there's really interesting things you can do, like how long has the family in this house lived there and what has happened to their flow over time? People tend to buy the 3-bedroom house, they have a family, the flows are higher, the kids go away to school, the flows are lower. Eventually that house turns over to another family, the flows are higher again. And there's really are some interesting predictive things you can start to do about what are we gonna see as our neighborhoods change and grow.
But you
Yeah.
kind of need to be measuring it at the neighborhood level for that to
Yeah.
be super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we could do it at the address level with the water
water.
bills, and
The
then
water
we
bills,
could,
yeah.
but we do also know, like, we have pump stations that primarily serve commercial and industrial users, and we have pump stations that primarily serve residential users. So there is even something we could do there. But for the purposes of tonight, we just look at everything because we're interested in how much we have available.
Is it primarily residential or commercial that are cheating on the sump pumps?
I was going to use the word cheater, and I didn't, but thank you, Mike.
I'd have to talk to Bruce Hoare about that. I think by the numbers, we find more residential ones. First off, a lot more of our commercial property doesn't have a basement.
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't
and-
think so, but.
You know, we have some pretty significant rules about things like floor drains and what happens with flows around that. So, but we'll get in migration. We had the sewer line from the rest stops on I-89 that runs down to the line on Oak Hill Road. I think Bruce said there's 6 manhole covers, you know, at the pavement level in I-89, and we had a lot of surface water flowing into those at one point. Somebody can have an open clean out, you know, near their house that rainwater flows into. Those are all things I'll talk about a little later about what we do about the total capacity the town has that can actually be, you know, fairly efficient and valuable ways to get back capacity if you can reduce those inflows. I mentioned committed capacity. There's 2 kinds of long-term committed capacity. The numbers there aren't the years the capacity was purchased, it's just the year, the version of the ordinance they were purchased under. Most of this is Taft Corners Park. I think a little bit might be Cottonwood, but it's generally longtime developers and landowners in Taft Corners who bought capacity, you know, when they had big plans and big long-range plans. And so this 38,000 gallons we don't sell to anybody else because we know there's someone who's going to put it to use.
But they can't hold, that, we changed the ordinance on that.
You can no longer hold capacity for more than 4 years. So today, we might sell a chunk of capacity to a new residential project, like the Snyder project, the Annex purchased a lot of capacity in FY24. They're gonna need to use that within 4 years as they build. So you don't want to hold it forever. And if you don't use it, you have to give it back.
These guys get to hold it because they're grandfathered in.
These are old vested arrangements here. And in the grand scheme of things, if this was 380,000, I'd be worried. If it's 38,000, it's relatively speaking a fairly small number.
We get to keep the deposit?
We do charge a holding fee. So anybody who's holding capacity pays us, I believe, quarterly to hold that, and it's not an insignificant amount of money.
Yep.
So yes, if they don't pay that fee, they don't get to hold it. So back to that bottom line, available capacity number. The town plan has this statement that we should really be planning for the use of our sewer over a long time frame, a 20-year time frame. And typically, when I've come to give this presentation to the select board, I've said, well, you know, we can divide it by 20, that's a 20-year time frame, and I've said something like, well, can we keep selling it the way we've been selling it for 20 years? And we've sold quite a bit more than that 13,832 gallon number in the last couple of years. No, we couldn't keep selling it like that. But this is a really kind of incomplete picture of how the sale and then assessment of what's actually happening in the system happens. And I wanted to add that for you tonight. So what do we do every year? We're at the top circle right now. The select board's make a decision about making capacity available for the upcoming fiscal year. Then over the next fiscal year, working clockwise, the town's going to sell that capacity. We're going to track what we sold. And then that capacity is going to be put to use. That new development comes online, and we are going to see what we sold as flow through the system. We're going to see it at the River Cove Pump Station meter. That's a picture of the pump station building right there. And then I'm going to come back next year, and I'm going to tell you how much is flowing through the system. And we're going to subtract that from how much we own, and we're going to figure out how much we have left to sell. So
the key being that you're not doing it from, I've sold this much, I have this much left, but
You
we're
got it.
using this much and I have this much left.
And that's what this graph is all about. When I was picking a picture for this graph, I originally had a shark because I call this jaws. The jaws are opening up, but I decided to use a building instead. So the red line here is the cumulative capacity sold for the last 20 years since 2003. So we're just adding every year, it goes up and up and up. So we've sold just under 250,000 gallons per day capacity since 2003. So what I mean by what we sold is somebody comes in and they say, I want to build a 3-bedroom house. We have a number of gallons they must purchase in order to build that 3-bedroom house. Those numbers are conservative. So part of the way we price sewer capacity is we make people buy more physical gallons than they're generally likely to use. So those rules are conservative. Then they go use it, and we see it as flow. And so the blue line is what has happened using 2003 as a baseline to flow. So there were some years at the beginning there where there was actually less flow than 2003, even though we were selling more and more gallons. But it did go up eventually. And so since 2003, we've seen an increase of about 100,000 gallons per day over those 20 years. But the gallons, and I put it in air quotes, that we've sold is 150,000 gallons per day more than that. So when is a gallon not a gallon? There's the gallon you buy, there's what you actually use. And if you work this utilization into that number I showed you, the 200 and something thousand gallons per day, and say, well, if we sold 20,000 gallons next year, but then we saw it as 15,000 gallons of flow, and we've basically rolled that 5,000 gallons back into what we have available to sell. This capacity lasts longer than 20 years, or you can sell more of it every year for 20 years than simply dividing the number by 20 expresses. So sewer capacity remains Williston's most constrained resource and the one that is the most difficult and expensive to add to. But the way this works means we shouldn't be panicking, we should be planning. And we can come back and talk about this in the overall context of the 2025 town plan and just in terms of how we plan for how much more capacity do we think we need against build out or town vision, things like that. But what this graph says to me is don't just divide by 20 and then panic because you sold 25 or 30,000 gallons last year, but you can really only sell 13,000 a year because really you can sell more than that before you're going to run out.
The good part about this line is we sold the red line, but
They're only using the blue line.
we're only paying for the blue line.
True businessman. You cut to the chase.
So typically during this process, we talk about what should the town do to address the limitations we do have on capacity. And, you know, so I talked about quite a bit that's on this slide just now, but what does it really look like to do it, to take a 20-year outlook on sewer capacity? I think through the town plan and other efforts, we should start thinking about how we prioritize and how we categorize capacity. The current sewer allocation ordinance does this by the type of use. Given some things I've talked to you about the Home Act and required density where there's water and sewer provided and other things, it might be time to bring back actually an old idea that was in the old sewer allocation ordinance, which is to think geographically. Where are the places in town that the town would like to spend its limited capacity? And are there places in town where, you know, the pipes are in the ground and the service is there, but the town doesn't have as high a priority of bringing new users into those areas? So we might think about the Village versus the residential zoning district, or Taft Corners versus the Gateway North area up by the Essex line, or versus the area around Exit 12. And if this is a limited resource, might the town want to consider how it spends that resource on the map, as opposed to what kind of user you're selling it to? And I said that's an old idea, that there was a geographic component in one of the older versions, pre-2015 of the ordinance. And all of that could be informed by the vision that will be expressed in that 2025 town plan you'll be helping us develop over the next year or so. So also, you know, whenever anybody asks me if there's capacity available to purchase, should the town purchase it, my answer is yes. Because it's limited, and if the opportunity arises, Williston's done well to take advantage of that. Another one to think about just with vision and goals is things like new users that you need in town or want in town. Do you want to prioritize that way, or particular types of job creation? Do you want to think about capacity that way? So those are just some things to kind of file away and think about maybe someday when we talk about the allocation ordinance. So a little bit about what Williston has been doing for the last 10 years in terms of capacity sales. This is through the last full fiscal year, FY23, and I'll show you later FY24 is a little higher than this, but you know, as little as 3,000 and change gallons per day, as much as 17,500. The business cycle and the residential development cycle are both pretty volatile. They can track with the economy. There's business that can come to town that needs very little capacity, like a mini storage. And there's business that can come to town that needs a ton of capacity, like Keurig Green Mountain or Burlington Beer. So these numbers change a lot year to year. And typically what's done in attachment A is the select board makes more capacity available than actually is sold. So we've sold a mean of just over 15,000 gallons per day over the last 10 years, but we've made 40,000 gallons per day total available to new users over the last 10 years. And most of the new capacity that's made available by the select board under this process is new commercial and new residential. So 10,900 mean over the last 10 years for new commercial, a little over 12,000 new residential, 10,000 set aside for encouraging specific development, where someone has to come back here and ask your permission to buy from that pool. We did that recently. And then we have these other categories like public facilities, affordable housing, residential additions, and pollution abatement. So those make up that remainder.
Going back to the geographic component, that would consider infrastructure upgrades possibly, correct?
You might think about that. You might think about where in the system do you expect lots more users, or do you want lots more users?
Maybe
And so
certain areas we'd want to kind of slow growth.
Mm-hmm. So you'd think about it in terms of the way you divide it up, what's available for sale, you know, who's going to get to connect to the system for how much. There's also a whole other element, which is system planning and actually planning for where you're going to put the infrastructure. And if you've ever looked at our sewer map, there's kind of this nice big really regular, sort of rectangular shape of where we provide sewer in Williston. But when you map the actual service on there, you'll see that so much of that is force main that we don't allow people to connect to. And so when you say to somebody, sure, you're in the sewer service area and you're in a place we'd like to see development, let's pretend, but that line in the street in front of you is a force main, you can't connect to it, you're gonna need to pump your waste, 2,000 feet up the hill or get it to our pump station in order for it to enter our system.
And who pays for that?
The developer does.
The developer
So,
does?
so there are times when development does not pencil out because the infrastructure cost of getting into our system is as high as it is. Just physically, it's a long run. There's also times when someone can be in the district, but it's not feasible for them to do that. We'll let them have a septic system, but that's only gonna work for a smaller user. So, yeah, planning for how you develop the system in line with where you do and don't want the growth or a certain type of growth is a really good strategy.
I would think like, light industrial growth, if we had an area that's all off of Industrial Avenue right now, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's no more room for growth over there, maybe there is. So that's something we can't make a plan on without knowing, correct?
Most of what's north of Industrial Ave is on septic systems right now. And therefore, folks who would be higher users of wastewater just don't locate there. Same thing is true for Williston Road going toward the South Burlington line, over where the Windshield and Vermont Paint Company are. We had a production bagel bakery manufacturer that wanted to go in there about 5 years ago, and what ended up making it not happen was they couldn't come up with an economical way to either upgrade the septic or connect to town services.
That could also impact our zoning.
You want to think about that. So you want to think about what you're allowing and does your infrastructure support it. There's always a little bit of a mismatch there, but yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. So I want to roll right into the recommended attachment A for this year. I'm showing you a couple years worth of historic allocation here. So these numbers are the amount of gallons per day the select board has made available in these various categories over the years. And really the whole story in the recommendation this year is we're recommending, myself, the Planning Commission and staff, that what's available for new commercial be reduced from 15,000 gallons per day down to 10,000 gallons per day. The only reason for that is we don't really know of any large commercial uses that are in process that would be coming in and looking to purchase their capacity. So our last big commercial user to purchase capacity was the hotel that's now under construction at Finney Crossing. They bought their capacity, they got their permit. We don't see any more hotels on the horizon right now. We don't see any wastewater intensive industrial users. So 10,000 is still quite a bit. It's more than has been made available in a few of our past years. And if somebody came in with something bigger than that, they could always come to the select board and ask to purchase under encouraging specific development. The other part of the story is new residential. Last year, this was recommended and made available at an all-time high of 30,200 gallons per day. That's because we have a backlog of residential developments in the permitting pipeline, but that have not moved forward to buy capacity and begin construction. And we were anticipating the first of those, the annex project on the former Essex Alliance Church property, coming in and getting going, which they did. They bought most of that 30,000 gallons to support that project. We still have a couple of large residential projects, Summerfield on the Catamount Golf Course, the Glazer project, Mishad, and a few other smaller ones in the pipeline. But that said, we don't need to put quite as much in to support the first phases of those as was in there last year. So the recommendation here is to go down from 30,200 to 23,500, just backing that off a little bit given what we anticipate coming in. We are still definitely in a backlog. We had a year, I don't recall, I may not have, yeah, I'll go back to this. I don't have a slide showing purchase of capacity. It's in your memo, but you'll see a table in there. Table 3 on page 8 is the history of allocations sold. And you'll note that in fiscal 22, we sold 0 gallons per day to new residential users. And the year before that, we sold just over 5,000 gallons per day. So we had a real lull there for a while, and we're catching up. So like I said, the cycle's volatile. The other thing I'll note before I go to the any questions slide is just that the other part of your memo that I don't have slides for goes into just a little more detail about the capacity recommendations for each of the use categories. And when we talk about new residential, it just gives you a breakdown of one potential way that could support a certain number of dwellings. I did it with 91 bedrooms, 92 bedrooms, and 23 bedrooms, and came up that total 23,500 gallons could support 240 total dwellings, which would be a good chunk of the projects that are coming through. It wouldn't be everything that's permitted. It would be a first phase for most of what's permitted. So if I'll stop there and answer any questions, because we can delve into those numbers if anybody would like.
You have several use categories. Are all use categories created equal as far as gallons per day?
No. The big ones are always new residential and new commercial. The other ones, just to support what's coming in, a good example is planned public facilities is a 0. We don't anticipate needing sewer to support the construction of any public facilities this coming fiscal year. If we knew we had a fiscal year that we were about to build say a community center, we would put a number in there, but we don't put a placeholder in that category. The other ones that are small, like pollution abatement at 1,500 or residential additions at 1,500 gallons, over time, those numbers have proved to be more than enough to meet the demand for those things. So residential additions, that's the category you'd buy out of if you were adding a bedroom to your house and you were on town sewer. You might have to buy, 50 gallons or something. So that's why the numbers are lower in some of those categories, because we just don't need enough to need any more than that to support the demand.
Okay, I was also thinking about, solids in the waste.
So high-strength waste is another whole matter, and we deal with high-strength waste both in our relationship with the Tri-Town about what comes from Williston and goes to the plant and whether there's any issues there. And then we do have our users that we know produce high-strength waste, where the ordinance allows us to require pretreatment and monitoring and things like that. So that's part of managing the demand that Williston puts on the system.
It's just another thing that you have to keep an eye on, monitor.
I feel like my all-the-time question is there any possibility that we know of right now of purchasing additional capacity?
Not that I know of right now.
Okay. And then the other would be, we've talked about this before, that there, the possibility of an additional wastewater treatment facility at some point in the future, coming online. I think it bears repeating, so that folks know the possibility of really how finite this capacity is.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I mentioned in one of my slides was just as a long-term planning exercise, starting to think about build-out and what might Williston look like 20, 40, 50 years from now, and what might need to be in place to support that. I did a back-of-the-envelope exercise thinking about the number, the total potential of Taft Corners under the form-based code was something like 4,000 dwelling units if you really built everything to full height. The existing capacity, if you took 250,000 gallons per day, sold it, and saw utilization like I went through tonight, you could support 2,400 of those dwelling units with what the town has. You would be spending almost all of it on new residential at that point. But the answer is there is a big chunk of the planned build-out and vision that is supportable with what the town has. That said, I wouldn't discourage anybody from engaging in some long-term thinking around more treatment.
I think the Regional Planning Commission, if I recall, in the next couple of years is going to study kind of wastewater capacity countywide. We know permitting any type of new plant on the Winooski is challenging just with the phosphorus loads right now too, but there may be some conversation in the future about expanding capacity at the Essex Junction plant that we own the 1/3 of the capacity in. When we purchased the 50,000 gallons per day from Essex Junction a couple of years ago, indication at the time is Essex Town and Essex Junction are holding what they have left, as similar to us. So they're willing to sell us that much, but that's probably going to be.
President Bruce stated that the state actually not issue permits for any sewage treatment to enlarge. Isn't that all on hold right now?
I'm not sure exactly, but I know they're monitoring it closely.
I had a conversation recently with someone from Heinsberg, the old, I don't remember what they call it now, the old milk treatment plant. That's where they get their capacity.
Yep, Heinsberg has a small system. They face some of the same limitations that everybody does. And in fact, some of Heinsberg's feedback to the legislature in the Home Act, which said, 5 units per acre residential density everywhere you have water and sewer, what Heinsberg asked for was the ability to identify some of their water and sewer service areas as not a priority where they wouldn't be required to support that density so they could focus on their village. They didn't want to spend it all up the hill, up CVU Hill, basically. They wanted to focus it in their village. And so that's another thing, totally different subject, but that Williston could think about is right now, everywhere there's water and sewer in Williston, 5 dwelling units per acre must be allowed as a minimum residential density. Williston probably could make an argument under the Home Act that it has limited capacity and would like to map a different boundary of where that highest density is allowed and deprioritize some of the areas on the fringes. I'll come back and talk to you about that some other time.
I was going to say, I love the idea of changing or directing this limited capacity to where we want the growth and where we don't want the growth. I love that idea. I assume it'll become, it would be a reasonable outgrowth of the new town plan, right? So we don't have to decide that tonight. What is actually everyone's talking about how there's not enough housing and we really have more housing. Is it being limited currently, like now, or the last 5 years, the next 5 years, by sewage capacity, by the economy, so no one's building, or by growth management? Are we doing it, or are we not doing it?
I believe right now interest rates are doing it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what Williston has done to set the table for affordable and abundant homes has been done. And now we're all kind of waiting to see what the Fed does, or what the price of plywood or labor does. And there's a cycle there where if labor's really expensive, but none of your laborers can find anywhere to live, then labor gets really expensive, et cetera. But I really do think that right now it's external factors. Development is hard even when it's easy. It's risky even when it's a sure thing. And right now it's harder and more risky than it usually is.
So dropping the new residential number is not doing anything to slow the housing growth that we need?
I don't think it is. We do have some projects looking to get a start. They may come to Bruce's doorstep, at 8 o'clock in the morning on July 1st, money in hand, looking to buy a lot of capacity. Or they may be on a longer track. A project like Glazer or Summerfield hasn't put a shovel in the dirt yet. They may have 6 to 8 to 10 months of building infrastructure before they're ready to buy permits for homes. But you want to have enough that someone can buy the capacity to get themselves started so they can go to their bank and say, yes, I can build these houses. So they can get their loan to build their road and drop their infrastructure in. So it's
It's a tricky balance, but
it's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
I don't think this number will cut anybody off. We looked at what's in the pipeline and tried to match it to that.
Other questions? Comments for Matt? We're not officially approving this tonight. The only thing before us is whether we're going to schedule a public hearing.
darn it, I was all ready to vote.
You-
I want to talk more about it, so.
I know.
You guys have a long agenda. I don't know.
I'll move to schedule a public hearing to receive comments on the proposed attachment A of the sewer allocation ordinance for fiscal year 2025.
Is there a second?
Second. Beat it.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. So we will.
If I may, Ted,
Yeah, yeah.
While Matt's here, my manager's report mentioning something of moving forward in the House and Senate right now. If Matt could update the board on that. We may want to take a formal
No,
position.
we want him to go and then come back.
Yeah.
I mean, Melinda could come for a minute. It's upstairs, downstairs, really. Okay, so as you are probably aware from reading the news, there's a whole bunch of legislation bubbling in both the House and Senate right now related to production of housing, flood resilience, environmental protection and land conservation, et cetera. And it takes the shape of following on from some studies that last year's session asked for about the effectiveness and process around Act 250, the structure of the state designations program, and the way some things related to tax credits and flood mitigation work. So there was an Act 250 study, a designation study, and a regional and statewide planning study. And those have all converged into a couple of bills. In the House, it's H687. In the Senate, it's S311. S311 is what is being called the Be Home Act, follow on to the Home Act. S311 had a mirror bill in the House, I believe it was 719. There was the big announcement of the tripartite housing support bill. That one stayed on the wall, didn't go anywhere. 687, which is mostly Act 250 reform, also picked up designations reform, which had been in its own bill at one point. And that's where Williston gets interested, because we have two state designations in town. We have the designated village center here in the village, and we have the growth center at Taft Corners. Having a designation has typically gotten applicants within that designation some permit relief, some access to tax credits. It gets the town priority under certain grant programs and access to other financial incentives, including the ability to establish tax increment financing districts. So the designations reform bill, which came out of this study, generally the goal that came out of their process was to simplify the designations program and make it more effective. And so there's 5 kinds of designations in the state right now. Instead of 5 kinds of designations, the bill proposes 2 kinds of designations, and one of them has 3 steps and the other one has no steps. Downtowns, villages, and new town centers like City Center South Burlington become centers. And there are 3 steps within being a center, and at the highest step of being a center, that's the gateway to tax increment financing now, among other benefits. Growth centers like Williston's Taft Corners and neighborhood development areas, which is another designation, become neighborhoods. And there is no tiered set of benefits for neighborhoods, and there is no TIF. And so the designations reform bill actually provided access to TIF for this thing that centers are going to become. But when that language was brought into H687, which is the bill that's moving forward, access to TIF for designated centers went away. So we've been informally talking with our legislators a little bit about that. In my role as a planner with the Vermont Planning Association, interfacing with the downtown board, I've brought it up with my counterpart in St. Albans City, Chip Sawyer, who's also on the downtown board. This may just be an omission, but there is a general thrust towards focusing the resources of the state on those village centers and downtowns, somewhat to the downgrading of the experience of the growth centers. So I'd like to see that corrected. I'd like to see growth centers like Taft Corners continue to have the opportunity to pursue any and all of the tools that they might use to achieve their visions and play the important statewide and regional role that they have. 687 has been voted out of committee. It's probably going to come off the House floor the way it is and go over to the Senate the way it is. That's likely where the opportunity for change will be. We think that S311 and 687 will kind of come together, and Terry, you can correct me if I have procedure wrong, in some kind of a conference committee. It'll all become one big thing, and we'd like to just make you aware of that issue and ask about speaking up with our delegation about seeing if we can have access to that tool for Williston.
Whether or not the select board decides it wants to study a TIF district at this point in time, this would enable that option to just be on the table moving forward. The way it's drafted right now in the House bill would take that option away from Williston altogether and kind of constrain us to not have that tool to even think about. Our thought in chatting today was the board could kind of you have consensus around advocating for that change. We could draft a letter and have the chair sign it. We could transmit that to Senate leadership that will be taking this up shortly.
Essentially, it's going to slow growth, slow up building.
Well, it could. I think it could take away what I think is one of the better ways that the town could direct growth. So we talked about where we build infrastructure and where we don't, and where we invest and where we don't. And to me, there are other ways for towns to do that other than tax increment financing, but it's one of the most effective ways that's available. And I think having the ability to at least right now just sort of think about it would be good. It also, if it was included as a benefit for growth centers, it would give the town more time to think about it, because what's going to happen is the existing designations are going to stay in effect with the benefits that they have, including our ability to potentially apply for TIF, until the regional planning commissions do their regional mapping and get these new maps that include designation boundaries in them done, or at the outside by the middle of 2029. But the RPCs are supposed to get their maps done like by the middle of 2026. So if the law went into effect the way it's currently drafted, we might be looking at saying, well, gosh, if we ever want to do this, now we need to go faster to get something done. And I wouldn't want the town to be in that position either.
There are currently, I think, 11 TIF districts in the state.
I think that's about right, yeah.
That's not going to affect any that are already in.
No, and most, if not all of them, are located with something that would become a center under the new law, but it wouldn't affect them anyway because they're already there.
We're talking about drafting something just to address the TIF thing in particular?
Yeah, some language to add to the Senate side of the bill that would cure this essentially to not restrict that from growth centers like Williston. So it leaves that tool on the table for us to think about in the future. No commitment at all with it, but keeps that option open for Williston.
Advocating that we keep the possibility of using a TIF in the future.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't commit us to actually doing it.
Right.
Mm-mm.
I don't see a downside.
Yeah, I support that.
We'll get a letter together. Matt has a good draft working already, so we'll get that to you, Ted, in the next week or so.
Okay.
Great.
We'll send Terry up there to straighten them out.
Keep your eyes peeled for the last 2 weeks of the session.
You're not retired yet, Terry. We're going to give you a war bonnet.
So thank you.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
We're going to be scheduling a public hearing. So,
We can go back to planning now.
yeah.
Nah, he wants wastewater.
We'll call him back over for something.
So next on the,
Till I go home.
next on the agenda, reconsideration of prior ARPA funds designation. I would actually ask what people's thoughts are about taking a break. Should we just keep going? It's already late. If we take a break, it's going to make it even later. On the other hand, if people are getting a little foggy, maybe a 5-minute break. I don't have a preference one way or the other.
Moving.
Keep it moving?
Yep.
I mean,
Okay.
we're gonna go into
Let's
executive
just
session
keep it
now.
moving. Okay, so,
Roll.
yeah, okay. So Eric?
Yep.
Prior ARPA fund designation reconsideration.
So there's a series of motions and steps to consider here. So I thought what I would do, this is a multiple step process. I alluded to a little bit last meeting. We've consulted with VLCT's federal funds advisor. We've consulted with our auditors on a process to consider here. I can walk the board through that process. Ultimately, what it does is it creates moving our ARPA funds into a new committed fund that would then remove the timeline for needing to obligate by the end of this year and spend by the end of '26. Go through this process, you get back to where you are today, removing those constraints. That's the high-level review of it. I can walk the board through what those steps are. There's a series of motions, but I can walk through the process, then the board can decide, does it want to go down that process to make those legislative changes, or you can carry on how we've been doing it, but we do have those deadlines to keep in mind. So, does that sound like a good
Yes.
approach for the board here? There's a lot of,
Do the high level, not the
yeah,
Yeah.
motion by motion, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
All of this is really just to get rid of the deadlines.
essentially.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and it's, has the added benefit of being completely legal.
Yeah, we've vetted that. A number of Vermont towns have taken this approach.
Yeah.
Katie Buckley at VLCT is her job is to consult on this and other federal funding, and we ran this by our auditors at the end of last week to double check on process. So essentially, we're talking about a 4-step process. The first would be prior allocations of ARPA funds in '23 and '24. The board made these allocations in January of each year as part of the capital budget process. You would need to reconsider those motions to kind of reset the table that those funds are available again to allocate. A good thing we'll look at is the table surely prepared in your materials. Some of these we're suggesting remain in that ARPA category. We've reported it, and we've spent those funds already. There's no need to reclassify those. So that the numbers reflected in that motion reflect that accounting that Shirley did. There's a series of motions. If you do reconsideration, the motion needs to be made by someone who voted in the affirmative of that motion. So the first one, there's some board members who were on the board in '23, and then so forth in the '24 one. If you do that to kind of reset the deck there, then there is a resolution to consider that obligates and spends these remaining ARPA funds as part of the town's general fund in this fiscal year. It's about $2.48 million. ARPA needs to be obligated for a specific purpose, and staff's define this as public safety wages in a resolution after we consulted with VLCT. And this ties back to the ARPA category of municipal workforce retention. So you would adopt that resolution to then book those funds for that expense, bring them into the general fund. At that point, it's going to create, will free up general fund revenue that would otherwise be paid for those expenses. This creates an added fund balance within the general fund. You've brought that money in, it's increased your fund balance accordingly. So then, under your policy, you can then assign that newly created fund balance and what we're calling by creating a community projects fund with a motion. I include an updated listing of all possible ARPA projects to rename them community projects funds at the suggestion of our auditor. That allows that to be a reference point, and then when we do the financial statements, we can carve out that fund separately from the fund balance in general fund. That's not a set in stone list. It allows you to do exactly what we're doing today with updating it, adding things and allocating, taking things from it. It establishes a connection there for how that's structured. Then finally, you've done that, and you've assigned that new fund balance to this fund you've created. Then you would reallocate from the spreadsheet those ARPA funds you designated in '23 and '24, to get you back to where you started with everything. And then we've updated what's left of this ARPA funds that you still need to allocate, and it's about $1.4 million. So this new community projects fund allocates everything you did previously, and it remains 1.4 million to go ahead and decide how you want to designate those moving forward.
I think the other benefit here is the fact that we take no risk in losing any money and sending it back. If you just say, make this up, do the old brick church, and we allocate 500,000 for ARPA, and then we spend 400. If we allocate that other 100, it goes back to the federal government. So this avoids all of that risk as well.
So is it your suggestion that we consider doing this tonight and making these motions?
That's our suggestion. Just, I know surely the ARPA reporting period for this closes at the end of March, so it makes it cleaner.
Okay.
But it's your decision to make.
So if we do this proposal tonight, it's before March 31st. So when we do that sort of final ARPA reporting, we will have reported all of our ARPA monies now.
I mean, I went through this, I think it's thorough, and I can see all the moves. I always get a little bit uncomfortable when something seems whatever the opposite of transparent is. It seems like we're just like shuffling money all over the place, but we end up at the end exactly where we are now. It's just in a community fund instead of an ARPA fund. So you take out the requirements for timing mostly, right?
Yep.
So pretty much the only.
Yep, it essentially, yeah, that you summarized it well. We're back where we are today without those time constraints to, I think, the one to obligate by the end of the year, that's some pressure, and then, certainly the spend by the end of 26, thinking about larger scale public works projects that might have some challenges with bidding and contracting. It removes that pressure from how you ultimately need to decide how you want to prioritize those funds. If you have a time constraint, that's going to play into a weighting factor.
Now, the only thing I am a little concerned about is that when we do the FY24 financial management report, get audited and everything, this money will show up as an expense, right?
It is already. It's not a separate expense. It'll show up as revenue.
But in the general, it will now be a general fund.
Not an expense. It'll flow through to the bottom line. The expense is the wages that are already there. We're just saying we're going to take these ARPA funds and we're going to spend them against the wages we've already incurred.
But when we have money in our budget that we want to put into the equipment sinking funds, doesn't that show up as an expense?
It does, but this is different because we're just going to take all of this ARPA money that's sitting over here, and we're now going to say it's revenue in the general fund. That's just going to flow through to your fund balance because all of those wages we're saying we're spending it against are already in the budget.
Right, so it flows to the fund balance, and then we're going to take it out of the fund balance and put it into a fund.
Assign, right? We're going to assign it.
And that does not show up as an expense?
Nope.
No? Okay. Does in my books, but that's
Yeah.
And by doing this, we still have it'll still be a future discussion on allocating the funds.
Yep.
I mean, if something happens, we need to allocate them differently.
It puts you right back where you are today, essentially. It's every decision the board made to allocate these in the past, it maintains those decisions, and then it leaves that additional 1.4 million for you to allocate from your project list and anticipate. Board may get back to that after budget discussions coming up.
I really support, eliminating kind of these deadlines, because I think in some of the projects looking forward to, there's anticipated, timelines for things, but as we know, if if a project's running long, like, you know, or materials are, you know, available to get, or, you know, if we wanted to order a piece of equipment and it, you know, isn't going to be delivered until after the deadline, like, I mean, so this really opens back up the possibility of utilizing those funds in the best possible way for our town, and not having to, you know, have those time constraints as a consideration for whether or not we should do a project.
I think somebody did a good job.
The designation constraints too, like the example you used with the old brick church, if we put $500,000 toward that renovation, but we only spend 400, then we can't say, cool, we're gonna use that 100,000 and do this benefit for the town with the federal money. Instead, the federal government's like, okay, we're gonna take that back because it costs less than you thought it would. But this way, we continue to have access to the money.
Yep.
So, yep.
So we need to answer your question. In the general funds, if you think of what we budget, it would be a transfer there, but when you think of the financial statements consolidated, this fund is still within the general fund. So it's nets to nothing.
Got it. That makes sense to me.
So if we do these motions, so we need to do each motion, vote on it, move on to the next motion one by one by one?
So the first thing we need to do is to have the motions reconsider
Right.
on the first one.
Yeah,
Then we would need a motion to amend. and
right, so but we're doing the motion and then voting on it, and then doing the next motion, voting on it,
And then.
back it, okay,
And then doing the motion
Yeah.
for the amended motion.
right.
In
Yeah.
two different places.
Yep, I just didn't know if if it was, like, I could lump them together at any point, but, okay, individually.
If we do this right, it's gonna be on YouTube.
The first part is just for us to, only
Yeah.
two of us couldn't make that motion. So I'll do the first one and say I'll move to reconsider a motion approved on January 17th, 2023 to allocate $176,000 of American Rescue Plan Act funds for projects as identified in the fiscal year 2024 capital budget.
Is there a second to the motion to reconsider?
I'll second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
So now I'll move to amend the January 17th, 2023 motion to allocate $112.56 of American Rescue Plan Act funds for projects as identified in the spreadsheet dated March 19th, 2024.
Is there a second to the motion to amend?
Second?
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Then I'll move to approve the amended motion as presented.
Is there a second to the motion to approve?
I will second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
You keep going, Carrie, you're in a roll.
So then we'll have the second one, and that I would move to reconsider a motion approved on January 16th, 2024 to allocate $696,000 of American Rescue Plan Act funds for projects as identified in the fiscal year 2025 capital budget.
Is there a second to the motion to reconsider?
I second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
So now I'll move to amend the January 16th, 2024 motion to not allocate $696,000 of American Rescue Plan Act funds as identified in the fiscal year 2025 capital budget.
Is there a second to the motion to amend?
Second?
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Then I'll move to approve the amended motion as presented.
Is there a second to the motion to approve?
I second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Now, when we get to the next block will be the resolution to approve. Suggestion is to add to the end of the motion to simply say, where was my chair? Essentially that appended to the resolution will be the approved meeting minutes. Appended to the approved meeting minutes will be this resolution, so it can be part of the meeting minutes.
Are you saying that we need to change the wording in the proposed?
Yeah, just to add at the end, fund,
Greta's all over it.
To 14?
yeah, and in 14,
So,
I thought I had this right in front of me, sorry. Let's see what I ran it by VLCT.
Do you have it, the actual language?
Yeah, she suggested,
I'll move to adopt the resolution for American Rescue Plan Act funds obligation and spending for fiscal year 2024 as presented and included as an attachment with the approved meeting minutes.
Is there a second to the
Second.
motion?
Second.
Second
What
is
she said.
recognized. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. So then,
Just one more.
yeah, the last.
so next is the action to, that would create the Community Projects Fund and establishes this working list of projects. And then it further moves to assign the funds that were just moved into the general fund with the resolution. Goes on to page 5.
Is there a motion?
I move to create a community projects fund for projects and initiatives to support the community and to establish a working list of possible projects dated March 19th, 2024, for future assignments from this fund, which may be updated from time to time. And further move to assign $2,485,589.72 of the unassigned fund balance to this newly established Community Projects Fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Then the final move is then to recommit these funds. And this is for previously classified projects there. You can see them running on that spreadsheet that's appended to the memo. And then we'll be back where we started and have the remaining funds in this new fund to then allocate again.
One last step to get us back to where we started.
Right back.
All right, I'll move to commit $331,650.38 of the Community Projects Fund for reclassified projects from fiscal year 2022 through fiscal year 2024 as listed on the spreadsheet dated March 19th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
I will further move to commit $771,000 of the Community Project Fund for projects in fiscal year 2024 through fiscal year 2025 as listed on the spreadsheet dated March 19th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Well. Thank you. Let's start at the very beginning.
If you come back, Eric, and say, if we forgot a comma, we gotta do it all over again.
I really hope not. We ran it by 3 different people.
We'll expect
We want to be sure.
it on the minutes.
That's right.
Yeah, that's worth the work. It's a lot of work. So next on the agenda, Personnel Policy Amendment, and Aaron, welcome. Thank you for waiting.
Got a lot of work done.
Yeah. So,
I'll jump right in because you've had a long meeting. So as previewed in your materials, we're proposing updated language for military leave in the town's personnel policy. This language would entirely replace the existing language and reflects the following changes. It would allow employees to be eligible to receive compensation for the difference between their regular and their military pay, if any. It won't always apply. For up to a total of 15 work shifts per calendar year. And this really intends to help ease an employee's financial burden that may occur while fulfilling their military duties and to show our support for people who are serving for military. The benefit would be prorated for part-time employees and also would be prorated for new hires for their date of hire. This could also attract with recruitment and retention of people that do serve in armed forces. The new language also refers to existing federal regulation and state regulations, rather than kind of summarizing those in the policy, and that way we're just always current. If those laws change, you'll see less of it in front of you anytime that a change takes place for those. Council agreed that that's best practice, and council did work with us on this and had reviewed our proposed language. In relation to that, we're also proposing to eliminate current Appendix I. Sorry, it's been a long night. Which again, it kind of summarizes the USERA language, and I think the original intent for that appendix was for noticing, but we actually notice it with a really extensive HR poster that is updated anytime that a law changes, because we subscribe for that, because that happens very regularly. And those are posted in each town building, so that satisfies the notice requirement. And again, it eliminates, any lag on updating the language if it changes. Really, that's the net of it. If you have any questions or feedback or direction for us.
Questions for Aaron?
Sorry to disappoint, I have no questions.
That's how good your presentation was.
That's right. That's how good the memo was. It totally laid it out.
If there are no questions, there is a proposed motion.
I move to amend the Personnel Policy Section 5.7, addressing military leave as presented, and eliminate Appendix I.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah,
Thanks.
You really could have moved her up in the agenda.
Yeah. So, moving into manager's report.
Yep, I handed out this evening, hot off the press, about 4:30 today, is the draft capital bill that is, I've been asked to testify at 9 a.m. tomorrow on. This is concerning the state police barracks first right of refusal. So I think I was texting with Representative Brady. I think at least her and I will be able to be there in the morning. I know they've had some back and forth since I testified last. Representative Brady updated me on that. I think the committee is trying to think how to proceed here with looking to give the town the first right of refusal versus what the putting this on the open market would fetch. Got this, I've looked at it a little bit. I'm trying to understand exactly what it's saying. I ran it by Terry, who served on this committee for a number of years. Kind of just looking for the board's direction here to help aid my testimony in the morning. I'll just turn it over to Terry for this.
So this is the chair of the Corrections Institutions Committee has presented this language, and it's been written by Legislative Council. And it's really just a way to, a touchy-feely way to do nothing in particular this year, except to give us some time and them some time to think about it between now and next year. And since we're not thinking about moving into or doing anything with the police barracks until, 2026, this gives them time to think about the problems that they have identified as it's a valuable piece of property. And the thought of some of the committee was that, well, what happens if we don't put forth a bid that matches somebody else? So this gives them some time to think about it. Gives us some time as a town to think about what we really want to do with this and how much money we would be willing to put forward, which can, if Buildings and General Services has the ability to accept any bid or reject any bid that they get. So this gives us and them some time, and this is, if I know the chair, and I do, this is her way of saying, we just want to do something but not commit ourselves to it at this point. And I think she's got the votes on, at least in the House Committee, to do it.
So this says basically that we could possibly be able to buy this for fair market value and not for whatever the highest bid is. I will say, just as a lawyer, the actual language of the proposed in the last paragraph. You know, in law, there's a huge difference between shall and may.
Oh, yeah.
This says, property shall be sold to the highest bidder. And then it goes on to say that the commissioner may reject any of these bids. So you must do it unless you don't. And this is, it brings me, sorry to be a little bit of a nerd, but this brings me back to one of the best moments in a Daffy Duck commercial I ever saw, where somebody sells them something by saying, and it's absolutely free for $5. And this is similar to that. It's like, so anyway, but I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, go.
So on or before December 15th, they'll come back with a plan to do something, is what the top part seems to
Possibly to
say.
give us a right of refusal,
Or not.
Or not, or set a price on it, or whatever. But it buys both of us time.
So there's not much. My guidance is go down and, you know, be presentable. I don't.
If I were to relay, the select board is amenable to this language and appreciates the consideration to continue this dialogue.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Perfect.
I know the committee has been asking what's Williston's plans for the property, and, you know, my position is the town wants the opportunity to have that conversation, which is why we've started this dialogue. I've shared a couple potential ideas I've shared. We're gonna be doing the community center potential site evaluation, and we can look at this site, but we're just not there yet. I don't think it's prudent to spend town's funds to evaluate potential for a property if we don't know we're gonna have control of it. So we need to have that question answered first. Okay. Live on YouTube at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Just quickly, want to just recognize our new firefighters, Alexander Lewis, Justin Soder, and Nathan Libby. Completed our rigorous 8-week recruit academy. Were sworn in on March 1st. They've joined their shifts. The department had a nice luncheon and graduation that they were able to attend. Our new 4-way stop sign is up on Holland and Market Streets. I know the public is happy about that.
Yep.
It was supported in a study. Did that. That is. Oh, quickly, you may recall on Old Creamery Road, we have our radio infrastructure in a small building, we'll call it. That building had issues, we believe, with rodents who chewed through the wiring, and we had to use a generator to keep it going overnight a couple weeks ago. Vermont Electric Co-op was gracious and came out and fixed it for us another day, but we've also discovered mold in that building, and the radio contractor will not go back in there. So I've authorized an emergency purchase order to get something new in place. So that will be going on. That's all I have for this evening.
Okay.
With a good rodent and mold story.
Nothing like a good rodent and mold story.
Is there other business? We've done the catering permits.
We've covered all that.
Okay, all right. Is there any other business for from the board? And if not, final thoughts on agenda items from this meeting? Anything to share?
Jean needs some new tabs, just in case.
Tabs.
16 tabs.
No,
17
no,
tabs.
stop at 15. We should not be here this
Hopefully we're
late.
not.
Stop at
I
15.
agree. This is a unique, this
You
is
could have put all the whole ARPA thing on one.
Yeah.
it's a rather unique agenda, though. It's not
Yes.
common. Okay, and then there is a executive session that is necessary. I don't think it's going to take very long at all, but we do have a proposed motion on page 6 of the manager's report.
I will move to find that premature public knowledge regarding a labor relations agreement with employees would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and further move that we enter executive session to discuss labor relations agreement with employees under Title I, Sections 313A1B of the Vermont statutes, and invite town manager Eric Wells to join.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. So we will not be coming back into public session after this. So we'll now go into executive session.